Patch 13.11 is here already, and it only feels like yesterday that all those crazy changes in patch 13.10 were here. Now we've got another bunch of buffs and nerfs, so let's see how these affect our tier list this week. As always, we're going to start off in that top lane, where honestly not too much has really changed. Most of the adjustments were aimed at other roles, but either way, let's see how the top lane is shaping up this week. In the S tier, we have Akshan, Darius, Fiora, Jax, Kled, Malphite, Olaf, Ornn, Poppy, Rengar, and Riven. Yes, Darius moves back up to the S tier, Mordekaiser and Set move up from B to A, and the Crocodile makes a reappearance in the B tier. The Renekton Buffs are finally here, as he's just been struggling for quite a while recently, and then they removed the dash from Prowler's Claw and he just got worse. This patch, Riot are buffing his E Slice and Dice cooldown and his ultimate cooldown and damage too, which are both great changes. However, we don't by any means think this is going to make the Croc broken again, but at least he'll be a little bit more viable. Darius comes back up to the S tier this week after just proving his worth recently. We thought he'd probably fall off a bit with the teleport buffs, but in actual fact he still just can't stop winning games. He's got some serious early game damage and all-in potential in the lane phase, and if he does get a few too many kills, he can 1v2 the top and jungler super easily. And then when it comes to team fights, he's got flash, he's got ghost, and the enemy AD carry can't do anything about it. He can clean up teams in a matter of seconds with those ultimate resets, and look pretty badass while he's doing it too. So if you haven't played Darius recently, he's still in a fantastic spot. Poppy is also just so damn consistent in the top lane. She just has so much to offer with her kit. She's got damage, she's got CC, she's got shield, she's got gank setup, she's got disengage, anti-mobility, and everything she needs to weak side or strong side. She can set up gank, she can TP bot with her ultimate. There's just so much to do on Poppy, and you can easily and quickly see how she can win so many games so far this season. She's also a great off-role pick in the jungle too if you are a top lane main that gets autofill, so give her a go if you haven't already. Over to the jungle now, and it's safe to say there's been some seriously broken champions here over the last few weeks. And the most obvious ones were, well, anything that could build Yumu's Ghostblade. But you'll be happy to know that it's getting a relatively big nerf this patch. And to compensate for this, Duskblade is getting some buffs instead. Now, we aren't going to move champions like Kha'Zix and Rengar out of those top tiers because honestly, they're still going to be really strong. And if Ghostblade really is that bad, there is plenty of alternatives. There's also no nerf specifically to Kha'Zix, which is pretty crazy, and that also means we're going to keep him in the God tier. In the S tier, we have Amumu, Evelynn, Fiddlesticks, Graves, Hecarim, Jarvan, Maokai, and Rengar. Rek'Sai and Ivern shoot up from C to A with their changes this patch, and Graves and Maokai join the S tier this week. Rek'Sai's buffs were definitely expected to, after she fell off a cliff since Riot removed the dash from Prowler's Claw. This patch though, she's getting her passive, her Q, her burrowed Q, and burrowed W all buffed, which sounds like a great step in the right direction. One of the really interesting changes is that the Tremor Sense tick rate is being reduced to 1 second, which just sounds awesome. It's going to be so much easier to track and detect your enemies, and when you land your Q, they'll be revealed for 5 seconds now. Some really positive changes here for sure, and we think that Bruiser Rek'Sai is probably going to make a bit of a comeback this week, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. Huge buffs to Ivern's Q, W, and E this week, which have made us bring him back into the A tier. Ivern has just been lacking a bit recently, and not only do these changes make him bounce back, but they also make him look pretty damn strong too. The brush changes on his W could even make him decent in lane as well, so watch out for those cheesy partnerships like Rengar or Caitlyn. Ivern still is a really niche pick though, and a ton of the player base still don't really have a clue what he actually does. But if you are an Ivern one trick, it could be a really exciting patch for you guys. Rell Jungle could also now be popping up in your games too, as Riot have introduced some changes to make this possible. If you want to hear a bit more about Rell's adjustments, then we're going to cover this in the support section. But just be aware that this could be a thing now. Now, we aren't going to add Jungle Rell to the tier list just yet, but we did think we should point out that it's happening, so watch out. Amumu's nerfs were overdue, as he's just been pumping out so much damage over recent weeks. These nerfs are to his W damage per tick, but honestly, it doesn't really feel like quite enough to stop him from dominating in such a large amount of games in 2 different roles. Amumu just knows how to win games so easily, as all you really have to do is make sure you can get those big flash ultimate combos off, and if you do, your job here is done. Get stuck into teams, stun as many enemies as possible, and watch your rank and LP just keep climbing. Amumu is just such a simple champ, and he's very abusable at the moment, so we don't really think this is going to change with these nerfs. Moving over to the mid lane now, and the nerfs to Ghostblade will also have an impact here too, but aside from that, not really too much to write home about. Although we do have some interesting champion changes here instead, with the buffs to Akali, Azir and Twisted Fate, and another nerf to Aurelion Sol. But is it going to matter? Probably not. In the S tier, we have Ahri, Akshan, Anivia, Annie, Aurelion Sol, Cassiopeia, Fizz, Neeko, Pantheon, and Talon. Yes, Akali is going to return to the tier list this week in the B tier with the buffs to her Q damage. Now, it's been a while since we've had Akali in the tier list because, to be honest, her win rate has just been abysmal, and it's only really those super duper fancy Akali one tricks that have actually managed to make her even look possibly potentially viable. Now, we've all seen what a fed and talented Akali player can do, and it's pretty damn terrifying. But realistically, she's just not been good enough at all for the general player base. Yes, she might have a lot of damage and mobility, and when she's in the right hands, you really do see what it's all about. But most of the time, when you do see an Akali, they just don't really do anything. These buffs are not going to make her broken, but they will remind players that she does exist. Azir is getting yet another round of changes, and this time it's another couple of buffs to his Q and W. We've said this time and time again, but Azir is just such an impossible champion to balance, because in 5v5s and competitive pro play, he's absolutely busted. But for the rest of the player base, he's just not quite as good. Azir takes some real practice to play consistently. He's a hyper-scaling, team-fighting, engaging mage, but actually in the lane phase, it's really easy to just not really do anything. And let's be honest, every time we see our teammates insta-lock Azir, we don't really get filled with confidence. But let's hope a little bit of this could change this patch with these buffs. More nerfs are here this week for Aurelion Sol, and ever since his mid-scope update, we've been seeing his name in the patch notes almost every single time. This patch, it's his E that's being nerfed with its mana cost in the early game plus its AP ratio per tick. Now, every time a Sol has been nerfed since his update, it's not really made any difference. So again, we are going to move him down from the S tier. It just makes you realise how completely busted he was when this first released, because he's seen plenty of nerfs since and still been broken. Aurelion Sol is just having a blast all season so far, so despite these nerfs, don't stop banning him anytime soon. Twisted Fate is getting some buffs to his W as well. It's now going to be a 6 flat second cooldown across all ranks. This will definitely help him out, making those gold cards be available more frequently, especially in the early game, and although it's definitely not enough to make this guy broken, it has brought him back into our B tier this week. TF has been a bit of a niche pick for a while, and it's been some time since we've seen him in a really strong place in the meta. But he will always be good at what he does best, which is picking off enemies with ranged stuns and ulting around the map, snowballing the game for his teammates. So let's see how much difference this change makes. After Neeko's buffs recently, she shot up into those top tiers, and it's in the mid lane where she's definitely having her best results. Neeko's deceitful and tricksy playstyle is completely and utterly abusable if you do know what you're doing. And your enemies can never feel safe anywhere on the map, because before they can even react, you've lane ganked them disguised as a minion and locked down them inside your ultimate. Neeko can constantly be a threat throughout any games, from bullying lanes in the early game to setting up huge team fights in clutch moments. So if you haven't played Neeko yet, it's probably time to pick her up before she inevitably gets nerfed. Well, let's move down to the bot lane next, and some more interesting item changes coming in this week. Gale Force and Storm Razor are both being nerfed, which, let's be honest, is the most expected change to ever happen in League of Legends since releases in Xiao got nerfed. Sorry, one for the OGs there. Also, some interesting and positive changes for Kraken Slayer, Static Shiv, and the Void Quickblades. Runarn's Hurricane is also seeing a nerf to its on-hit damage as well. So how does this all affect our tier list? Well, in the God tier, we still have Kog'Maw and Karthus. And in the S tier, we have Ezreal, Jhin, Twitch, and Xayah. Jhin moves out of the God tier, but we still think he's going to be in a great spot despite his item nerfs. Xayah shoots back up to S, Yasuo's up to A, and Lucian moves down from S to A. Kalista also moved up to the A tier with her buffs, and Aphelios moves down to B with his nerfs, but more on those two shortly. So Riot have said they didn't want to nerf both Kog'Maw and Runar's in the same patch, so they've gone for the item nerf first and foremost. However, nerfing his second item is probably not going to be anywhere near enough to stop him from just dominating in a ridiculous amount of games. The recently changed Gwynsu's Rageblade didn't actually positively impact too many champions overall, but Kog'Maw was definitely a huge exception. He's just such a force to be reckoned with right now, offering an immense amount of relentless damage in any teamfight. He can be so difficult to deal with in the mid to late game once he's got those core items, and if he has an enchanter in his pocket, he's just so hard to shut down. There's not many picks that rival Kog'Maw's damage potential at the moment, so without any nerfs this patch, this probably isn't going to change. The Kalista buffs this week are absolutely massive, and they aren't just making her playable, but they might actually make her a tad bit broken. They're buffing her base stats and making it so her auto attacks don't cancel when enemies go out of vision, which are honestly two amazing changes already. They're also finally making her passive AD ratio 100% up from 90 and buffing her Q and her E as well. Kalista is not an easy champion to play, so we've popped her in the A tier for now, but over on our website we break down our tier list into two separate ones, one for low elo and one for high elo. And in the high elo tier list this patch, she's gone straight up from C all the way up to the S tier. We expect these changes to have a huge impact and could make Kalista completely busted, so we're very excited to try it out. Nerfs to Aphelios as well as nerfs to his typical items see him move back down to the B tier after a very brief spell in the A tier. Aphelios is just so hard to balance because those pros can abuse him every single game. And despite his unimpressive stats for the rest of the player base, Riot have to keep him at bay to prevent him from being one of the best champions in the game in pro play. Now these nerfs are not going to sink him to the 45% win rate hole that he was in for such a long time, but they will make a little bit of a difference. There will still be plenty of builds and options to go for on this champion this patch though, so don't be too put off by seeing these nerfs in the patch notes. And if you do enjoy playing Aphelios, crack on. It's safe to say that Jinx has had her fair share of the limelight this season, and again she's receiving another nerf, this time to her attack speed per level. Jinx has just been dominating the AD carry meta for quite a while, so it's expected to see some nerfs, but she did fall off a little bit after the big item changes in 13.10. We think this nerf will make a bit of a difference, but we aren't going to move her down from the A tier just yet. Let's see how much impact this change makes and update it in due course. But also, don't forget to check back on our YouTube channel next week for updated tier list video too. Kai'Sa is an AD carry in a bit of a weird spot right now because, to be honest, none of her item builds really quite suit her well enough. Unfortunately, it just doesn't matter which build you go for because you still need more than 2 full items to hit either of your upgrades. And this is always what Kai'Sa has been about, the power spikes with her items and ability upgrades combined. But without these power spikes, she just always feels underwhelming. So many people, including us, thought Kai'Sa may love the new hybrid items and all their possibilities. But in reality, she's just not really quite hitting the mark at the moment. Let's see what Riot have planned to improve this in the near future. But for now, she's going to stay in the B tier. Let's finish off with those supports then. Echoes of Helia and Ardent Censer are both being nerfed as the enchanters are a little bit too strong at the moment. Moonstone Renew It is being buffed too, but not quite enough in our opinion, as Shirelias and Echoes are still looking like much stronger options. So in the God tier, we still have Milio and Janna, and in the S tier, we have Amumu, Annie, Blitzcrank, Maokai, Rakan, Senna, Sona, and Thresh. Not too much change here really, aside from a few returning faces to the S tier. Rell's huge adjustments this week are likely going to have a bit of an impact, but we aren't going to move her up from the A tier for the time being. Riot have mentioned they are pushing for off-role jungle Rell. However, if they do hinder her support role, they will consider reverting it. And even without all that, there's still lots of positive things to take from this little update. Here's a few of the most important things to note, but don't forget to check out the official patch notes to see the changes in full. So her base attack speed is finally going up, which if you played Rell at all whatsoever, you'll know just how big this one is for Rell mates, especially when it comes to actually clearing wards. Her passive armor and magic resist shred is going down, however it now stacks up to 5 times on each target and can be applied by all of her abilities. Rell's Q now stuns all targets hit for 0.75 seconds and hits for full damage to all targets too. But it no longer heals anymore and the cooldown and cast time have gone up. The range has also seen some tweaks too. Rell's W is getting a crazy amount of minor changes to damage, distance, range and movement speed, and now her E is completely different. She now charges with her ally, gaining movement speed which is increased towards enemies and her bonded teammate, and when combined with her other abilities it just gives her such a more reliable way to engage that feels so much better to play with. But yeah, that's a lot of things to wrap your head around. Support Rell should feel better to play now, and get ready to see her in the jungle too with a new damage to monsters. Let us know in the comments below what you think of the changes, and check back next week to see how she performs when these changes have had some time to take effect. Milio has easily been one of the best supports and best champions in the entire game since his release, as his utility is just simply unmatched. Milio can be paired with literally any AD carry in the game and just make them look instantly broken. From something as simple as his Scorch passive which can win lanes on his own, and then you add the bonus range, healing, shielding, and of course his ultimate too. It's very easy to quickly understand just how good Milio is, and this isn't going to change in patch 13.11 with no nerfs on the way anytime soon. Milio is a lot of fun to play, but he's just a bit too strong to say the least, especially when considering just how easy he is to play too. Don't get me wrong, it's great to have such a simple support to pick up and learn, but some nerfs are probably on the way shortly because his success rate is just a bit absurd. And his crazy high ban rate at even the highest ranks just shows how bonkers he really is. Blitzcrank is a support that you shouldn't forget about though, because he's still winning a lot of games in the right hands. Blitz is one of those champions that never really disappears, because in any game one good hook can be all it takes to carry lane and win the game anyway. From getting your duo buddy Draven super fed in the lane phase to landing one good hook at the right moment in those big late game teamfights, Blitzcrank will always have a chance to win games on his own. And when you look at the stats you can see he's still effective to this day. So here's a quick reminder to play him again, because he's still in a great spot. That's going to wrap up today's video all about the changes in patch 13.11 and how they affect our tier list this week. We hope you all enjoyed it and let us know in the comments who you're most excited to play. Don't forget to check out Mobalytics for everything you need to improve at League of Legends, like builds, runes, guides, counterpicks, matchups, combos, highlights, and so much more. I've been your host Vale here at Mobalytics, and as always guys, take care.